My parents were both killed in a hit-and-run car accident when I was just 10 years old. My dad was at the time 40 and my mom was 36. Neither of them had relatives who could take me in. We lived in a really small church-going town where everyone knew one another. My dad had been the heir to a small fortune, so he never really had to work. He didn't like the big city, so he and my mom decided to move to a small town where he could have an antique store. My mom was into collecting antiques, so this was a good idea for them. I would have had to go the orphanage route when they died, but this couple from the church, who I will call Mr. and Mrs. Jones, made this big to-do in church about how a little girl needs a loving home and God has given us this joyous task of bringing her up in our home and hearts. It's been a long time and I don't remember if those were Mrs. Jones' exact words, but they did say something cringeworthy like that. So in the end, Mr. and Mrs. Jones ended up becoming my foster parents. The Joneses had their own daughter, Lily, who was a year older than me. That should have meant that we would be super good friends, but Lily had her own thing going and practically ignored me. I can write countless stories of how Lily manipulated everyone around her and would blame me for random things. To give you an example, one day she once stole a lapel pin that belonged to her father, as she liked shiny things. She would wear it secretly in school, and I knew about it. Mr. Jones soon discovered that the lapel pin was missing and turned the house upside down looking for it, as it belonged to his father and he really loved it. They found the pin in Lily's room, where Lily, instead of admitting the truth, acted like she was shocked and started blaming me for the pin. I was dumbfounded by her accusations and denied them vehemently, but she convinced the Joneses that it was in fact me who had stolen the pin and hid it in her room to hide my crime and blame her instead. This is just one of the many, many times when Lily would get away while we were growing up by blaming me so I would get punished or grounded instead of her. The Joneses received a stipend from the state to take care of me, but they also received checks every month from my dad's estate, which was supposed to take care of me until I was 18. When I did turn 18, I would receive full control of my inheritance. The Joneses weren't exactly cruel to me, but in private it was clear they were just using me to build up their reputation in town. In front of other people, they would fawn over me in a sick, cotton candy fashion that made me uncomfortable. They would also make Lily be nice to me in public, which she absolutely resented, but went along with it. The Jones would also put on a big show whenever social workers came to check up on me. They would coach me before the lady would come and tell me to praise how godly and wonderful they were. After the social worker left, they would go right back to ignoring me and spending my dad's money on crap on the internet or on their trips. It was clear to me, even as a teen, that the Jones were using only some of my endowment, both from the state and from my trust, to take care of me. The rest they would spend it on themselves. As I grew older, I could see that my Jones parents would pretend as though they had great business acumen and that's why they had more money and could buy a new Volvo. Where I'm from, a new Volvo is an event. And take a trip to New York and buy fancy clothes for Lily. When I was 17, I noticed that my Jones parents were stockpiling away my trust fund money to pay for Lily's tuition to college. Throughout this time, the Jones would never outright say so, but would heavily imply that I owed them, and that once I got control of my inheritance, I should be godly and generous and give them some material compensation for all the work they did to raise me. I think they already got lots of material, especially since Mrs. Jones practically stole all of my mom's antiques from my parents' store and kept them for herself. Gave some to Lily or to her other relatives. One thing my mom never kept at her store was an extremely expensive Baroque-era fine china set, absolutely complete and worth tens of thousands of dollars. Not a replica, but the real deal. So real, Napoleon Bonaparte himself might well have eaten a steak off those plates. Probably not, But you get the point. It was my china set, of course, but Mrs. Jones thought I was an idiot and didn't know that. She would always talk about how this china set will go to Lily on her wedding day. Mrs. Jones assumed that since I always dressed like a tomboy, didn't care about all my mom's antiques that Mrs. Jones had stolen or given away, and I also wouldn't care about the china set. When I was a kid, my mom told me that things were things and not to obsess over them, so having the china set for myself wasn't an issue. What was an issue was Mrs. Jones acting like it was hers to give away. So once Lily went off to college, thanks to my biological mom and dad's money, I had to make my own plans. I had always done well in school and had actually gotten a partial scholarship to attend school out of state. The rest I could easily pay for with my inheritance, which I would very soon have control of once I turned 18. Per usual, Mr. and Mrs. Jones were haranguing me about how I owed them compensation, and since I was going to be rich soon, I ought to share the wealth with them. I never promised them anything or argued whenever they talked like this. I just smiled and kept a tally of every single bank statement. I got them quarterly, that my trust issued over the years. The Jones family never shared them with me, of course, but when I asked the bank for a yearly rundown, they were more than happy to oblige. I figured that over the past 7 years, they probably stole or misappropriated more than $200,000 of my parents' money, to say nothing of the state money they misused. I think they had more than shared my wealth. I also wrote down every single major purchase my Jones parents clearly made over the past 7 years with money that was clearly beyond their means as a housewife and an insurance salesman. Things such as a $50,000 car for cash, a used $18,000 car for cash that they gave to Lily, trips to Hawaii and New York, and cash gifts to the church that made them look super generous at my deceased parents' expense. I kept it all in a nice 3-ring binder. I started arranging my travel to my new campus so I could officially move out. I didn't have much stuff at the Jones house anyway and had zero intention of coming back, not unless they apologized. The Jones knew I was leaving but didn't bother seeing me off, because they assumed I would come back to give them their due. I waited for our church's year antique sale extravaganza, set to begin in 3 days. Per usual, the Jones donated all sorts of random stuff, many of it knickknacks that used to belong to my parents and technically belonged to me. They weren't shy about giving away my stuff and taking credit for it. While Mr. and Mrs. Jones were on one of their shopping sprees with my parents' money and away from their house, I boxed up the china set that belonged to my mother and took it with me to college. On the way to college, I stopped at an antique store that I had researched about. I knew the good people here would appreciate it and give me a fair price for the set's value. Thankfully, they did, and I asked them to transfer the money to my bank account, which could only be accessed by me. As expected, my Jones mom went ballistic when she found her china set missing. She called me flabbergasted, and I informed her how I had sold them. She started yelling at me that I had no right to do that and it should have gone to Lily. I told her that it belonged to my mother and she left it for me, so why would Lily deserve to have it? Mrs. Jones began shouting how ungrateful I was and how selfish I was for selling it when they had spent all these years raising me. I laughed hearing her words and told her that she would be hearing from my lawyer very soon. She started asking me what I meant by that, but I cut the call knowing that she and Mr. Jones were going to receive a big surprise soon. You see, I had met up with the lawyer who handled my parents' will, and we had discussed everything that my Jones parents had taken from me over the years, which was quite illegal. A week later, my Jones parents received a package by registered mail from me and my attorney. It contained my binder where I showed my bank statements and also a list of all their spending extravagances. It also contained a warning from my attorney that should they ever try to contact me again for money, they will receive a bill and a court date. That was that. Since then, Lily and the Jones family never reached out in 7 years, and I've intentionally kept it that way. About 6 months ago, Lily unexpectedly contacted me on Facebook. I remember blocking her, but it seems she made a new account. She shared that she's now married and expecting her first child, expressing thoughts about how she's been thinking about family. Lily admitted regret for not treating me better, acknowledging the absence of siblings in her life, and expressing a desire to share this journey with me. She apologized for the years of neglect and hardship she caused me, assuring me that her current outreach wasn't motivated by money, but by genuine remorse as she found herself in a better place. It felt good to see that she understood her actions and truly apologized. I hesitatingly replied back to her. It felt good to see that she understood her actions and truly apologized. I hesitatingly replied back to her, acknowledging her message and expressing my initial reservations. However, over time, our conversations evolved. Slowly, we started sharing bits and pieces of our lives. I told her about my journey through medical school and the challenges I faced to become a doctor. Surprisingly, Lily opened up about her pregnancy, sharing the joys and anxieties of impending motherhood, and spoke about her married life. As the weeks turned into months, our exchanges deepened. We spoke about our respective pasts, bridging the gap that had once seemed insurmountable. The wounds of the past began to heal, replaced by a tentative understanding and a shared commitment to rebuilding what was lost. It was a gradual process marked by cautious optimism and a genuine effort to forge a connection that had eluded us for so long. Through our conversations, I learned that Lily had truly changed and was committed to being a better person. She expressed remorse for the pain she had caused and was determined to make amends. Hence, when I finally graduated this year, I decided to invite her to my graduation ceremony. Surprisingly, she accepted, and after 7 years, we found ourselves face to face. She had that radiant pregnancy glow and hugged me warmly. I congratulated her for her first child, and we looked at each other sentimentally. I met her husband Kyle for the very first time, and he seemed like a level-headed and supportive guy for Lily. Over the course of the evening, we shared stories, laughter, and even a few awkward moments. It was during these exchanges that I realized Lily had indeed transformed. The bitterness that once defined our relationship had given way to a newfound understanding and acceptance. She apologized to me again, this time in person, acknowledging the pain she had caused during the time we were growing up. Her sincerity struck a chord with me, and I found it within myself to reassure her that I had moved past the scars of our shared history. I let her know that I appreciated her efforts to change and that in the end, forgiveness was a healing balm for both of us. It was a cathartic moment, releasing the lingering tension that had haunted our connection for so many years. We took a lot of pictures that day, and Lily posted some of them on social media. It wasn't long before Mr. and Mrs. Jones discovered that Lily and I were back in touch. A week later, Lily called me, excitement evident in her voice. She explained that her parents, Mr. and Mrs. Jones, were eager to talk to me and extend their apologies in person. According to Lily, they were genuinely happy to learn about my accomplishments as a doctor, and she believed that they had undergone significant changes as well. Although I was apprehensive, I had seen firsthand how Lily had changed over the years, hence I thought I could definitely give the Jones a second chance. I unblocked them on my phone and let Lily know that I was okay with them calling me directly if they wanted to. Mr. Jones called me that evening, and he congratulated me for becoming a doctor. He told me how proud my parents would have been, which was great to hear. He talked about how proud he was of me and that Mrs. Jones felt the same. In that moment, I felt a mixture of emotions, surprise and skepticism, but also a hint of hope. Hope that people could change, and that growth and self-reflection could lead to redemption. Mr. Jones extended an invitation to me to meet in person for a family dinner, and though hesitant, I agreed. understanding that this could be an opportunity for closure and perhaps a chance to build something new. After 7 years, I was traveling back to the town I grew up in. It was a surreal moment, and I prayed that everything would go well between us. I was warmly greeted by Mrs. Jones, who gave me a bear hug. I was surprised by her affection, but I can't deny that it did feel good. Mr. Jones came out to greet me as well and helped with my luggage. They ushered me in, and I was shocked to see some of their close family and friends waiting to surprise me. They all yelled "Surprise!" as I entered, and I couldn't help but feel genuinely happy. We all shared smiles and laughter as they welcomed me back. The atmosphere was surprisingly warm, and it seemed like they had genuinely put effort into making me feel comfortable. Mrs. Jones guided me to a spot where I could sit, and everyone gathered around, eager to catch up. As we settled in, I noticed the effort Mr. and Mrs. Jones had put into preparing a meal. The table was filled with homemade dishes, and the inviting aroma filled the air. It was clear they had gone out of their way to make this a special occasion. The dining room was soon adorned with laughter and clinking glasses as we talked about various things, memories from the past, my journey to becoming a doctor, and their lives since we last saw each other. Then, in the middle of dinner, Mr. Jones clinked his glass for attention. We all looked at him surprised. He got up from his seat, holding his glass in front. "Proud to say we've done a great job with this one," Mr. Jones declared, raising his glass. "She's a doctor now because of the values we instilled in her." My Jones' mother chimed in. "We took her in when she had nothing. We provided the love and guidance she needed to become the success that she is today. We are so very proud of her." I sat there, simmering with resentment as I was confused as to why they were congratulating themselves for raising me when all they did was use me for my parents' money. I looked at Lily in confusion, and she looked apprehensive as well. As everyone toasted on my accomplishments, I smiled politely, trying to contemplate whether or not to let this charade continue. Throughout the evening, the Jones couldn't resist boasting about their role in molding me into a successful individual. Eventually, I couldn't take it any further. The urge to set the record straight became overpowering, so I cleared my throat, capturing the attention of the room. "Thank you, everyone, for your kind words," I began, my tone measured. "But there is something I need to share, something that has been on my mind for a long time." The room fell silent. Every eye was on me as I began to recount the painful truth of my upbringing. I spoke of the years I spent feeling like an outsider in their family, of the constant belittling and emotional abuse, of the struggles I faced to rise above the trauma they subjected me to. The once joyful atmosphere turned tense and uncomfortable. The Jones exchanged nervous glances as I exposed the facade they had carefully crafted. They shifted uncomfortably in their seats, avoiding eye contact with me. I put my head down and worked hard to escape this hell so I could build a life for myself, I continued, my voice unwavering. They only put up this face in front of the public, but behind closed doors they would take advantage of my parents' money and buy things for themselves. Gasps rippled through the room as my story unfolded. The guests, once eager to heap praise on the Jones, now sat in stunned silence, absorbing the shocking revelation of the dark underbelly of my seemingly idyllic upbringing. As the truth settled in, the Jones were left fumbling for words, their attempts at damage control falling flat. The dinner that started as a celebration transformed into an uncomfortable confrontation, exposing the painful reality behind the facade of a perfect family. I then left the party after this. I was no longer willing to play a part in their charade. The shock and disbelief lingered in the air as I walked away, leaving behind a room filled with uncomfortable silence. In the aftermath of that revelatory evening, I have been receiving calls from Jones and Lily. I wanted to get an opinion from everyone on Reddit if I was indeed an a-hole by spilling the truth in front of everyone. Update 1. Thank you everyone for giving me your honest opinion. I do realize that I should have known that the Jones would never change. I don't know why, but I had genuinely thought that they would have repented over the years how they treated me. But that day, watching them fawn over me and try to take credit for my hard work was infuriating. I did talk to Lily after a few days since the incident. She apologized to me and made it clear that she had no idea that her parents would behave this way. I assured her that I didn't blame her for their actions and explained to her that I just wanted people to know the truth. Surprisingly, she supported my actions. I'm happy that she clarified from her end, and I will continue to have a relationship with her. As for the Jones that have tried to reach out to me, but I don't have the energy to answer their calls. Update 2. It's been a month since my last update. To everyone asking, yes, I finally had a talk with the Jones. I called them out of curiosity, willing to hear what they had to say. Mrs. Jones answered the call, sounding hesitant yet hopeful. Mr. Jones joined the conversation after a moment of awkward silence. They began with attempts to justify their actions, emphasizing the financial strain they faced and how they believed they were entitled to a share of the inheritance. I listened quietly, letting them air their perspective. When it was finally my turn to speak, I calmly but firmly laid out the undeniable facts. The misuse of funds, the emotional manipulation, and the overall mistreatment I had endured under their care was too much for me mentally and emotionally. Hence, when they tried to brag about me at the family dinner, it felt extremely fake. I explained that the revelation wasn't intended to harm them personally, but to expose the truth that had been hidden for far too long so that they could realize the harm that they had caused. Mrs. Jones eventually broke down, admitting that they had lost their way and got carried away with the idea of wealth and societal standing. Mr. Jones, too, expressed remorse, acknowledging that their actions were inexcusable. Despite their apologies, I made it clear that the scars of the past couldn't be erased with mere words. The conversation concluded on a note of mutual understanding, albeit strained. The Jones expressed a desire to make amends, understanding that it would be a gradual process. I didn't promise immediate forgiveness, but acknowledged their willingness to change. Since that conversation, there have been periodic check-ins, but I've maintained a guarded approach. Rebuilding trust takes time, and I'm cautious not to let sentimentality cloud my judgment. The journey towards reconciliation is ongoing, and while I remain vigilant, I'm open to the possibility of healing and forging a new understanding with the Jones. The ball is in their court to prove that their remorse is genuine and that they are committed to positive change. Update 3. It's been 5 months since my last update, and I am happy to report that Lily has given birth to the most adorable baby ever. I visited her in hospital, and nothing can even come close to describing how it felt when I held my baby niece for the first time. I'm so grateful that Lily has changed and reached out to me. The birth of my niece has been a source of immense joy and has further solidified the connection between Lily and me. Lily has also continued to play a role in bridging the gap between me and her parents. I appreciate her efforts to mediate and can see that the Joneses are getting better and better. As for me, I've been going to therapy for the last 2 months. The process of healing is slow, but each session brings a newfound understanding and a step towards emotional liberation. In the professional realm, my career as a doctor is flourishing. The experiences and challenges I faced during medical school and residency have only made me more resilient, and I've emerged stronger, both personally and professionally. I'm cautiously optimistic about the future, and I am learning to redefine my understanding of family, trust, and personal growth. Stay tuned for more stories from our girl relationships.